flavor and they were watery. There was not a whole lot of substance to them. There was probably a fair amount of fiber in their skin. I don't know what their nutritional content is, but I did learn that they're diuretic. A diuretic is something that you ingest that causes you to urinate more often. And I had almost unlimited amount of crowberries on my site, but I was super worried about salt. I had been having issues with hyponatremia, which is when you get low in electrolytes and your body kind of starts to act wrong because you get lightheaded, you have low blood pressure. On extreme cases, it can swell your brain and put you in a coma or kill you. But it basically makes you feel sluggish, uncoordinated, and lightheaded. And I did not want to exacerbate that by eating these delicious berries that were going to cost me a lot of salt. And that was something that was kind of hard to do. I actually did test that before I went out at orientation camp. I ate several handfuls of crowberries, and sure enough, they were diuretic. So I knew for my system at least they were not going to be the right thing. It was really hard to see a delicious food source that you can't tap into. Pretty much what I had to eat for berries, I maybe ate 20 at the most blueberries on my whole site, and they're teeny little blueberries, not market-sized blueberries. I only saw 2 or 3 blueberry bushes on my entire area. Crowberries everywhere, but I couldn't really eat them. Lingonberries were probably 90% of what I ate berry-wise. They were really sour. They're like a high bush cranberry, or similar to, I should say. They're not the same, but they're similar to. And then we had a couple of species of juniper there that had little berries on them that, I say that I use the word berry very loosely. They were edible though, and they did have a lot of, they were packed with that juniper flavor. It was actually almost too intense, but I ate some of those, and then there was a fair amount of rose hips out there, and I ate those pretty much every time I found them. Those were kind of nice because they held on after the snows and everything, and they were on a bush that was tall enough to access after the snows, so they're a really cold hardy plant or berry. And I would eat those whole, seeds and all, chew them up, grind them up into nothing, just in an effort to get vitamin C in me, because the rose hips are very high in that, but also the fiber content that was in there. There's not a whole lot of plant fiber in your diet out there, and that's what you need to keep the train running in your guts. So let's see, Wonia ends up, I noticed she's got a lot of pretty cool, she finds a pair of moose antlers, a pair of matching sheds laying like this right next to each other on the ground. That is a freaking cool thing to find. If you are a shed hunter, shed being an antler that's been shed from the animal that carries it, to be able to find one and then have to look around all over the whole area to find the second, and that's a pretty cool thing to find a set of matching antlers. For you to be able to find 2 of them that are laying right next to each other, they literally have to pop off the animal simultaneously for that to have happened. That's 1 in a million chance that she came across that. Boy, she was pretty excited about it herself, but that would have been a really cool thing. I was able to find only 1 moose antler in my whole time out there, and it was all kinds of chewed up by bears and wolverines, and hers both looked like they were in really great shape still. Antler is a really good resource. It's a big chunk of bone that's bright white that you can carve lures out of, you can make other tools out of. It's just a handy material that can be made into other stuff. She is walking the water's edge and notices the edit kind of changed a little bit what she was actually saying while she was seeing it, but she finds a bunch of alder branches that had been fell and chewed on by a beaver and were being drugged to a lodge somewhere, a beaver lodge somewhere. The edit says that she was seeing branches that were chewed on by a moose, but that was words from somewhere else I later learned from her. But she did have a beaver in the area. She was never able to catch up with it, I guess, but that was an animal that I had discovered I had in a pond nearly 2.5 miles from my camp. And sorry for the planes. I live on a little island that has a fair amount of pretty well-off people on it who are also super cool people, which means they like to fly planes. So not so far from a small airport in this rural island, and plane noise has always been tricky with these videos, but they're usually come and gone like that. So yeah, so she's out, she's scanning the landscape and reading it. She notices she's got moose, she notices she's got grouse, or excuse me, beaver, and on her way back to her camp, she sees a grouse land up in the branches on in the forest, out of the corner of her eye. And again, another amazing archery shot, tags the thing out of a tree from a good distance, and it flies off. Her arrow passes right through it because she had a broadhead loaded for large game, and it flies off. And that was one thing I remember always needing to, like, when I was carrying my bow. I carried my bow everywhere I went for a very long time. Anytime I left camp, I had my bow ready to go. And you have an arrow knocked when you're doing that. So in the area I was in up to this point, there was no sign of recent big game anywhere. Nothing for months within a mile or two of my camp. But man, if you can tag a large animal, a moose or a muskox or a bear or even a wolverine, that's a massive game changer for you. So, but you're more likely to see a squirrel or a grouse or a rabbit. So do you walk around with the arrow, the small game arrow, for the animal that you're likely to see, or do you walk around with the broadhead for the animal you hope you see but almost certainly won't? It's a little bit of a conundrum. She, I noticed, probably shot multiple animals with a broadhead that would have been better with a small game animal, but you gotta, when they're on the run, you don't get to reload, your other arrow out there. And she nearly lost this grouse because of that. A big game arrow head has a blunt force trauma effect. A broadhead will pass through a small animal without even slowing down. They just cut a neat hole and keep on going. Whereas a blunt face, like a judo point or an old ammo casing on the end of it, transfers all the force of that animal into the animal, or of that arrow into the animal, and typically breaks a few bones, but really just kind of like just shatters them inside. And it's a very swift, clean kill for a smaller animal. So she was doing broadheads, nearly lost her bird. Luckily, she looks for ever and ever and ever, finally finds that grouse, and feels really good about not only not losing the animal that she killed, but she gets to eat. So that's pretty sweet. Very extremely grateful for it, and I believe she actually does an offering of some of the liver of that animal. It doesn't really quite make it into the edit, but to express her gratitude for it. I also want to mention the sweater she has on. She's got this gorgeous handmade sweater that she's wearing through all of that, which she was in the process still of making. At some point you see her, she pulls up her sleeves while she's cleaning the animal or about to eat or something like that, and one of the sleeves is still not completed. Well, Nia went out into the field with most of what she wore, she made herself, especially all of the warmer stuff. She made that sweater, and it wasn't complete when she went out. She was actually still knitting it while she was out there to finish it up, and it's gorgeous. It was really neat. But to add that extra layer of complexity to not actually being out in the field and still finishing your gear, but to prepare, she didn't know that she was going to be on the show at all until maybe late June, early July, and she just had a pretty small window of a couple of months to decide, okay, I'm going to make everything and do it. And she did. That beautiful buckskin coat that she has on, you can either see episode 4 or 5. She did that. She tanned those hides herself, and very impressed with her. She has a channel called Buckskin Revolution. If you want to learn how to do that stuff, how to tan buckskin, how to make leather goods, how to make all kinds of different crafts, and other survival skills, go to Buckskin Revolution. It's a super cool channel. She's also doing these super in-depth recaps of all the episodes and her own experience, and I'd really recommend you checking out Wonia's channel. Then it shoots to Ray. We're at day 17 at this point. He goes out to go fishing. He's got a favorite fishing rock he likes to fish from. Slips on the way and falls in the water, puts both of his feet in the water up to his knees probably, and very nearly tumbles over and lands in the water himself. And that sucks because the water, it's like 1 degree above freezing out there. But he decides, I'm here now. I'm gonna keep fishing. He doesn't let it get to him, and he keeps going for it. No action on the water. It's just dead in his area. He doesn't have a good fishing area. He has only had in his entire time out there at that point, at day 17, 1 fish, 1 squirrel, and probably a bunch of berries. I don't think he put anything else in his mouth at that time. 17 days, and that's what he's running off of. Is 1 animal that would more or less make an entire meal for like an average front country meal, and then that squirrel, it would be stretching it to call it a whole meal's worth of fish to eat 1 whole squirrel. So he's feeling it at this point. He's realizing, hey, I've been out here 17 days, and I've killed the only squirrel I've ever known and caught 1 fish. That starts to add up. That's kind of frightening. But he doesn't want to go back after tasting the freedom that he's experiencing out there. It's still more attractive than lack of food. Maybe that's not for everybody, but for guys like me, for Ray, for everybody who's on the show, all the women, all the men. Nikki says some great things about it too. If you have not, as a person yourself, experienced that kind of freedom, make it important. Make it a priority for you to go and figure out what that is, because it'll be really sad for you to come to the end of your days and not even realize that it exists, let alone experience it for yourself. I personally believe it's a big part of why I am on the planet now, is to experience that. Whatever being put me here, or however I came to be here, that's a big part of my mission in life. And I happen to think that it is for everybody else too. On some level, it's an important thing to experience. So make it a point to do that in your life. Let's see here. Runs back to Wonia. What did I write there? Chicken scratching. Oh, she plucks her grouse. She butchers it really well. Offers some, like I mentioned earlier, and immediately, like, her batteries are full again. She's like ready to go out and get some stuff done. That's one of the things when you bring your body to that level where you're at exhaustion from lack of input from food. When you do eat something, it's like you can feel it. It makes food more real for you. You can immediately directly feel it in your body, and it's not just like, oh, my hunger is gone now. It's like, no, my brain works better and my body works better, and it translates into action and fulfilling your life. That's another thing that if you haven't done before, like that freedom thing, if you haven't experienced like bringing yourself to the edge like that, and then feeling what it feels like to really truly appreciate a meal and experience what it's doing for you, do it. Do some fasting. I remember I biked across Washington State once many years ago, and I was eating a lot of like freeze-dried food, stuff that's not really food anymore. And I stopped in at a gas station and bought literally like a gas station apple and a banana from like right next to the cash register. And I had been riding, I think the first day I rode like 67 days. It was 40 degrees, windy, and sleeting on me the whole time. It was just such a draining day. The next day I rode over 90 miles, like 90, I want to say 97 miles my second day, carrying a trailer with 80 pounds of gear total. It was a burly bike tour. The third day, I got this apple and this banana, which were not by any means organic or fresh at all, but I could feel like those things go into my body and directly affect how fast I could pedal my bike and all that. And it allows you to appreciate food a little bit more. Go out and do that sometime. Ride a bike across the state. Comes back to Ray again, and he decides he needs to go out for a roam. He's had enough of no action. He's on an island. I don't know that they ever really say that on the show, but Ray is totally cut off from the mainland. Whatever was on that island when he got dropped off is what he had. And in the wintertime, that's not the case because the lake freezes over and stuff can come and go. But in the summer and fall, when we were out there in the late fall and winter, early winter, there's nothing out there other than what was out there. So he kind of got shafted a little bit in regards to access to wildlife. And he knew he was on that island, and he knew what his chances of game were a little better than we can as an audience member. He was on an island, and what was on that island was what was on that island. He could not wish for anything more. So that's a very hard place to be in. That's a very hard place to be in, to realize that that's kind of the hand you've been dealt. And that's a big part, that has always been a big part of the Alone Show. The hand you're dealt is as big a piece of it as the skills and the attitude that you come in with. And he gets a rough hand to be dealt with. So he goes roaming to look for game. He's on a slope. He can't go anywhere without going either uphill or downhill at his site, and feels himself gassing out pretty early. He's got to take a rest almost immediately, and he's got to take a hard look at his situation. And he decides it's not workable, and he's got to tap out. Just logistically, the animals are not there, and he makes the call to go home. He's aware of why he hasn't tapped earlier. He's afraid of going back. He didn't want to go back that early. He doesn't want to go back to the 9 to 5. He doesn't want to go back out of fear. And Ray is not the kind of guy who is not going to do something out of going to do something out of fear. And he knows that about himself, and he decides that's not a good enough reason. So he makes a hard call and he taps. I can't blame him one bit. He didn't have any prospects out there, and he did go home with that gift of realizing what freedom is. And my understanding now is that Ray has moved out of his urban area and is moving pretty soon into a rural place in eastern Washington, near where I used to live, actually. So he's making moves. He's going after that freedom, and that's a pretty huge gift to have. Jordan basically says he doesn't want to stand on the edge of the lake like a moron and fish all day. He's not into it. He's not a fisherman. He would much prefer hunting and trapping. So that's what he goes off and does, and talks a little bit about his lessons that he learned from his dad. His dad had diabetes, had to have his feet amputated or his legs amputated, a series of events up till his death, and he stayed joyful through that entire period. And what a gift to give your loved ones, to go through that and keep that attitude and show them that that joy is a decision that you get to make no matter what. That positive attitude is a decision that you get to make. Most people wouldn't go through an experience like that. For Jordan to witness that, that's going to turn you into a particular kind of man or woman. And in Jordan's case, definitely he's a strong dude for it. A lot of fortitude. Then he has this idea that he's got this moose, with potential for moose out in his area, and he wants to make sure they go where he needs them to go to put an arrow into them after he's missed that shot. He goes out with his axe, and he starts following small poles and making essentially a fence to direct large game into an area where he has a good shot at it. And that is one thing that after I'd seen him doing that, I think would have been really brilliant in my case. I did not have large game that early in the game coming anywhere near my camp, but there were rabbits, there were mice, there were voles, there was a squirrel. And I didn't do a whole lot of trapping while I was out there. I did put up two or three traps, but mostly experimentally. But to do trapping, you really have to have many traps, and I mean over 100 to make it subsist, to subsist your diet on it. One of the things that I noticed that I wasn't quite used to, down here, the rabbits, the deer, the game, they frequent the same paths more or less. They create game trails. There was game trails up there from the large ungulates that would walk through. They would make a path, and it would stay there for years because things grow so slowly there. I didn't notice that, at least on my site, that the rabbits did the same thing. They were really random. Even after the snow fell, they didn't use the same track more than once. It was just randomly scattered all over the landscape. So that makes it really hard for trapping. Is like you're looking for places where they consistently go, where there's bottlenecks that they use, and those didn't exist where I was. So me seeing Jordan do that with his fencing makes me think, well, I could have artificially created that and then made my own bottlenecks and put traps in those areas, and that just didn't occur to me while I was out there. So I probably would have stepped up my trapping game a notch or two had I given that more thought and experimented with it a little bit more. So we're at the day 20 now. Checking snares. Raven calls again. Jordan's out checking his snares. He's got a lot of snares out for rabbits and small game. He hears the ravens again, or at least the ravens call again in the footage, and there's a moose about. And he has his bow and he takes a shot at it. And this time it hits the mark. This time he puts an arrow in a moose. And that's where the episode ends. Episode 5 is going to pick up with, like, does he get this moose? What happens next? Somebody, for the first time in Alone history, puts an arrow in a large game animal, an animal bigger than a squirrel or a grouse. And that was a huge moment in Alone history, and Jordan's going to have it forever. To get a moose, in your lifetime is a pretty big thing. To do it in front of 2 million people on television when 59 other people haven't been able to pull it off, that's a pretty impressive feat. And I'm really excited to see what episode 5 looks like and how he deals with whatever comes to pass with that moose. Thank you so much for attending my channel and watching my recaps on these videos. This experience has been massive in my life on levels I can't even begin to explain. And to be able to share it with other people is fulfilling to me. I'm a teacher of wilderness skills and direct living skills, and I have a